Once a giant, always a giant.
Welcome back to Giants Capital. Today, we are here with Joel Moran. He's on TikTok. I'll leave his description in there for TikTok. He has a Pick a Side podcast on YouTube. He also has his own podcast on, or not podcast, but own channel. I'll leave that link in the description as well. Let's get right into it. Today, we're just going to be doing strictly draft talk. And first, I want to talk about this Wilson versus Field debate. Like, everybody's been talking about it. Fields has fallen and risen on many people's draft boards. Where do you view that whole debate and things like that?
Listen, I like Justin Fields. I made a quarterback rankings list, and Fields is my fifth ranked quarterback. He can easily be ahead of Lance, though, because I think Lance has a lot of question marks. But Wilson is remarkable. I mean, the way he plays the game is remarkable. If it wasn't for the hype and insane hype that Lawrence has in, obviously his physical intangibles, I would have put Wilson over Lawrence. I think that he's been amazing. He was amazing this past season. The way he can throw the ball is different than anybody in his class. So I think he's in a class of his own in that aspect. But I do like Fields. I think that all these quarterbacks have a lot of potential, but I think especially nowadays, people have been emphasizing potential a little bit too much. I think you still have to be able to play the quarterback position at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think when people look at Fields, they look at his previous season. And when you go off Zach Wilson's previous season, you got to look at it. Zach Wilson had a mid to below average junior year, or no, sophomore year. And then he came in his junior year and he lit it up. And then you got Justin Fields, who had really great. I think he had like 40 touchdowns with one interception. And then he follows that up with below average season, in my opinion, because yes, he beat all the teams he was supposed to beat, and he put up the stats on teams he was supposed to beat. People love to bring up his Clemson game, and I don't take anything away from him for it because, he got hit and he came right back and did what he had to do. But personally, when people say he did all this to Clemson, Clemson does not have a single first or maybe even second round defensive player on that defense that went against him. So you telling me just because their name is a big name school, he beat who he was supposed to be. He was supposed to do that. But then you look at guys like Northwestern. He had 114 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Alabama, 194 yards, 1 touchdown. And then he had Indiana, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. Like, these are games against like defenses with NFL draft players on these defenses, and he played below average. And I can't accept a guy playing below average against these talented defenses and these talented teams when I need him to.
Yeah, not only that, but the Northwestern game, I'm glad you mentioned it. That was one of the few games where they schemed up and had a defensive game plan for Justin Fields, and we saw how uneasy he looked the entire game. Justin Fields, even against Clemson, he had a lot of bad plays. And the thing is, I don't get enamored with stats in college. Everybody likes to bring up stats. I don't get enamored with that in college. And obviously, people bring up that Clemson game. Look, I like how he played. But when we're talking about competition, right? And that's the knock on Wilson, that he didn't play much competition. Yes, you could say that to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you still have to throw. You still have to throw the ball into the windows. And Zach Wilson did just that. But I don't know why it's a knock that a player got better. Zach Wilson had a okay sophomore season, and then his third year he plays phenomenal, and people are like, "Oh, that's a 1-year wonder." Is it, or did he just get better? Did Zach Wilson just get better? I mean, if you read up on Zach Wilson, his story is amazing. I mean, this guy was driving 10 hours to California to train with his quarterback coach, John Beck. And after his training sessions, the craziest thing about this, and I read it up, is that when he had free time, he would go and he would do DoorDash to make some extra money. So even after his training sessions, he would do DoorDash. So there are some people in California right now who at one time got their food delivered by Zach Wilson, who's about to be in the NFL. So I think his character it just speaks wonders, and that's why I'm really high on Zach Wilson. Outside of the talent, I think the person alone, he's a phenomenal dude.
Yeah, and one thing that people love to bring up, and like I've seen a lot of scouts who are verified in Twitter and things like that bring up the fact that he wasn't named captain, which was when I looked at it, he had most of his games. He had the C on his chest. So one, that looks like it was false, and two, when I'm glad you brought it up. The point about being a 1-year wonder, it makes no sense to me because you look at Joe Burrow. Before his last season, he was a nobody. Nobody knew about Joe Burrow, and then he came for LSU and he dominated, and then he was the first pick. And then you got Zach Wilson, and I get Joe Burrow played at LSU versus BYU. I get it. There's a drop off on the teams he played with, but you got to give the guy credit. He played great, and you brought it up earlier about his throwing style. It's lovely to me. That's one of my favorite things about him is his ability. Like, it was one play where he rolled out to the right side of the field and threw it all the way to the left side of the field. And I was amazed. At one point in time, I'm a Giants fan. And at one point in time, we were like 0-5, 0-6. And I was, I was watching Zach Wilson because he was a guy who was like, okay, this might be my quarterback. So I'm gonna watch this guy. And I watched every single game and every single play. It was exciting to watch him. And a lot of people like to bring up the fact that he doesn't take the easier throw and likes to take the harder throw sometimes, which to me isn't a knockoff because, yes, in the NFL, you might always want to take the easier throw. But he knows personally he can fit those hard throws into those tight windows. And he doesn't have to worry about, does he have the arm? Does he trust himself? He's a guy who likes to go out there and fling it, which is arguably one of my favorite things about him, on top of him just seeming like a genuinely great dude.
Yeah, the thing about it is that no matter what you do, people are going to knock you. Zach Wilson makes it tougher on himself and makes incredible throws. Oh, look, he could have taken his check down. If a quarterback takes a bunch of check downs, oh, he can't make the big throw. There is always a knock on a prospect, and everybody's going to find a way to criticize somebody. But Zach Wilson, earlier in the college season, I've been on Zach Wilson for a while. Obviously, I wanted the Jets to get Trevor Lawrence. I'm a Jets fan. But when we had the second pick, I made a TikTok back in December about it that I'm not mad because Zach Wilson is going to be there and I think he's going to be great. So, back then nobody cared about Zach Wilson. Nobody criticized him like he did. But now you see all of this criticism coming up. And back to your point about the 1-year wonder thing, Baker was a 1-year wonder. Joe Burrow was a 1-year wonder. Kyler Murray was a 1-year wonder. Cam Newton was a 1-year wonder. A lot of the great quarterbacks that have been one of the top picks have been 1-year wonders. So the fact that Zach Wilson is that, and that's all of a sudden a knock, is a pretty ridiculous thing to me.
Yeah, like 1-year wonders aren't a bad thing. Like, you look at Mac Jones, 1-year wonder. He only started for 1 year. Trey Lance started for 1 year. There's multiple top first round quarterbacks in this draft that are 1-year wonders. And now, speaking of Mac Jones, let's go. He's during this whole draft process. Now, he's not the average athletic guy, or he's not your Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson type of guy. But, just because the NFL is adapting, people are like, he's not going to be able to mold and fit into each scheme. He won't succeed. How do you view Mac Jones, and do you think he'll succeed in the NFL?
I love Mac Jones, and I think he will be successful. People knock him for his athleticism, but his 40 time was 4.79, the same time as Dak Prescott. 0.1 second over Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes ran a 4.8. Mac Jones is at 4.79. So the fact that he's getting knocked for being some type of slow poke or Snorlax is ridiculous. I mean, Mac Jones can move around in the pocket. He has great feet. He has great pocket presence. And I don't know if Mac Jones will be the third overall pick in the draft because obviously I think if it were me, I would pick on number 3. But the pressure from the media, from the fan base, they are going to ride if Mac Jones is the pick. If Trey Lance is the pick, they'll be fine, which is ridiculous to me because he has way more question marks than Mac Jones. But people look at the running ability, they look at the physical traits. 6'4", 225, Lance and Fields can run. But Mac Jones, he can do everything, and I think he can read an offense and he can really play behind that Shanahan system. So I really love Mac Jones. And another story about him, I mentioned one earlier about Zach Wilson, but Mac Jones, when Bill O'Brien got the Alabama job, Mac Jones taught him the playbook. So a college quarterback teaching a former NFL head coach the entire playbook, I think that's pretty remarkable as well.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And one thing that I've heard, watching all the analysts on TV shows and things like that, is that every scout they've talked to says Mac Jones is a very smart guy. Like, that's just what he's known for. And, you know me, I'm a Giants fan, so I'm accustomed to Eli Manning. This Daniel Jones stuff is new. Quarterbacks that sit in the pocket aren't bad things. You got Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning. Big Ben wasn't that mobile. Like, all these successful guys who sit in the pocket and can just dial you in. And that's literally what he did in the SEC, was literally sit there and dial in. And I forgot where I saw it somewhere, and it was a college player that was doing an interview. And he was talking about, you know, the Mac Jones debate on if he's going to succeed and things like that. And he was like, this guy's going to be great. And the one thing he said was that Mac Jones can literally sit there and tell you what defense you're in and how everything is going to go out before the play even begins. And that's amazing to me. And the fact that, like, this guy had 4,500 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, and only four interceptions. I get he had Devontae Smith, who was also the Heisman, but you got to understand, like, this guy, there's a lot of tight windows that he has to get the ball to. Everything's not so easy. You cannot just put any old random guy in that system and he'll just tear it up. Like, I watched Bryce Young when he was playing, and I get he was a freshman and he was still young, but the skill level drop off was just amazing to me. And just because Bryce Young is more of a mobile guy and Mac Jones is in the pocket, and I guess they would have to change the playbook a little bit, but the fact that Mac Jones is able to dial in and you put any defense in front of him and he's just knocking you out the door is just more remarkable to me.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about Mac Jones too is that, like you mentioned, he's cerebral in the pocket. He can go through all of his progressions. And the knock on him is that he did throw to open receivers, but the ball placement was always there. I very rarely did I see Mac Jones and I'm like, wow, like that ball is behind or it's to the side. It was always on point. And this narrative that an immobile quarterback can't succeed without having a great offensive line is kind of a flawed view because, I mean, Kirk Cousins, I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but he had a top 10 quarterback like season last year. And the Vikings have had the worst offensive line in the league for the past couple of seasons. And Kirk Cousins actually has been playing his best football in Minnesota thus far. Matt Ryan with the Falcons, they never have a good offensive line. Matt Ryan still has a great season time in and time again. You know, Phillip Rivers with the Chargers, even when they didn't have a good offensive line, he had good years. So just because you don't have a great offensive line doesn't mean a quarterback like Mike Jones can't succeed. And if people always, because when we talk about these young quarterbacks, the goal is to win a Super Bowl, no doubt about it. But even if you have a Mac Jones, even if you have a Justin Fields, even if you have a Trey Lance, you have to build the perfect team around them for them to win. You know, the Kansas City Chiefs, they did not win the Super Bowl until their defense got better with Mahomes, and he's the best quarterback in the league. So if you want to win a championship, you always have to have one of the more stacked rosters in the NFL. But even if Mac Jones goes to a situation where I don't think the offensive line is perfect, I think he'll succeed. And you're a Giants fan, but I said this on my podcast. If Mac Jones is there at 11, I'd take him. I would take Mac Jones.
Now, see, I'm not gonna say I agree, because part of me, I love Daniel Jones and I've become accustomed to him, and I get he has a turnover problem and all of that, but he just gets in a bunch of unnecessary hate, in my opinion. Like, he just doesn't do anything. You don't see him on social media talking about anything. He's never a guy to go out there and bash any of his teammates, anything like that. Yes, the production on the field, but I'm willing to give him a year 3, especially with now him actually having a wide receiver 1. But what I was going to say was, and as a Giants fan, it pains me to say this, I hate actually having these words come out of my mouth, but if Mac Jones was to fall to Washington, I seriously believe Washington could become a Super Bowl contending team and should be taken very seriously, because now they have a solid running back, 2 solid receivers, a solid tight end, and they would have a very accurate quarterback. On top of that, a top 3 defense. That, unless if they could put it all together, that would be very scary sights for anybody who you put against them. And like you said, the narrative that immobile quarterbacks it blows my mind that people actually take it serious, because my favorite thing to say is that people, like casual fans and things like that, they love to follow trends. And once you hear all these analysts and higher end guys say that, okay, Mac Jones doesn't fit what the rest of these quarterbacks do and are mobile, then they're going to say, okay, he shouldn't be picked. But when this guy does everything else right except for this one thing. Like you say, he still ran like a 4.79, so he's not slow. He's doing all these other things, and they're just flying over people's heads, and it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, and people often talking about, oh, you see the trend of the NFL going towards more mobile quarterbacks. Well, how about how the NFL has been the last like 70 plus years? Like quarterbacks like Mac Jones have been winning all the time. So why can't Mac Jones win? And back to your point about Daniel Jones, I do think he gets some unnecessary hate. I actually had Daniel Jones above Dwayne Haskins that year in the draft. I thought Daniel Jones was going to be good. So I didn't hate Daniel Jones. And I know everybody freaked out when the Giants picked him. And that's kind of the same feeling I have if the 49ers pick Mac Jones. I think everybody's going to freak out. Then down the line, we're going to see, oh, it probably was the right pick. That's if the 49ers do draft him. But this is gonna sound crazy because we don't know if Mac Jones will do good or not. I'm banking that he will. But I even said this before. If I were the Dallas Cowboys, I would have not paid Dak. I would have drafted Mac Jones at 10. Obviously, at that time, we did not know Mac Jones was in the running for the third pick. I thought Mac Jones was going to be like in between 8 to 15. But if I was the Cowboys, I would have drafted Mac Jones, had a quarterback on a rookie deal, and then I would have let go of Dak because I like Dak a lot, but I just think what he was paid, and you look at the Dallas Cowboys roster, it just doesn't look like a team that's going to win anytime soon.
Yeah, you paying a guy like that, like you look at the guys who get paid, Josh Allen, Mahomes, and guys like that who are like they have that it factor. Like Mahomes is Mahomes, like him himself is an it factor. Josh Allen has arguably the best arm in football. Dak isn't. Dak is just in that middle. Like he doesn't do anything too perfectly, in my opinion. He's just good enough for you to win games. He's not too extra. And going back to your point, it was actually two things that popped in my head when you spoke about it. I was the biggest non Dwayne Haskins fan coming into the draft because I was the guy who was saying he was not going to succeed because of his throwing, like how his throwing motion and everything like that. It just didn't seem like it would succeed over into the NFL. As we look back now, it didn't. And going back to Daniel Jones, I actually really liked him as a prospect. He did a lot of things right in my opinion. Now, will I say I wanted him at 6? No. What I wanted at 6 was Josh Allen, the defensive end that's now at Jacksonville. I wanted him at 6, and then we still could have possibly got Jones at 17 or even traded up a bit if we felt like he wouldn't have fell there. Very simple, very easy. And now you look at the Giants now, they have no type of edge threat when we could have fixed that problem a few years back. So, like, and I do think, like, I know you may, I watched that one. I remember specifically watching the one you said this is a make or break it year for Daniel Jones, which it is. And I talk about it all the time is the fact that, like, people have to realize that Daniel Jones has never had a good offensive line or a good wide receiving group. And when he plays with Saquon, his stats are significantly better. You look back to his rookie season, he lost Saquon early in the season and got him back later on. And then you come back to his second year, he didn't have Saquon at all. Then you go back to his Duke days, nobody on his roster made it to the NFL. He was by himself. Like the amount of wide receivers that he had that would drop balls were out of this world. I think now that he has Kenny Golladay, and I'm very high on Golladay as a Giants fan, and even as a non-Giants fan, I would say Golladay is still he will significantly succeed with Daniel Jones in this year 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and this is why, even though I make TikToks, I don't classify myself as a TikToker because I think that a lot of people on TikTok that primarily are on that platform and they talk about sports, it's very like their takes are very try to suck you in and try to say something crazy, and obviously the thing that gets the most attention nowadays is talking about young quarterbacks. Oh, this guy is going to be bad. I can't count how many times I've seen people say Joe Burrow was a bad quarterback on TikTok, which is like the most ridiculous statement ever because if you watch the Bengals play, Joe Burrow kept them in every game. But I don't subscribe to the narrative of trying to call young players, young quarterbacks, players, whoever it may be, bust. I have a rule. It's a 3-4 year rule. In 3 years, the player that you are is probably the player you're going to be. You look at Jared Goff, his rookie year, he was horrible. People could have called him a bust after that year, but then his second year, he had a breakout season. Then his third year, he had a great season, but kind of dwindled down a little bit. And now his fourth year, okay, now we know who Jared Goff is. Same thing with Trubisky. Rookie year, not so good. Second year, Pro Bowl, they made the playoffs. Third year, okay, now we're finding out more about Mitchell Trubisky. That same thing that statement holds true for football and basketball. So I have that 3 4 year rule where I don't call a quarterback a bust until I see that okay, this is who he really is. So right now, Daniel Jones in his third year, this is the year where we're gonna see who Daniel Jones truly is.
For sure, for sure. Like you look at, like you said, you were naming a bunch of guys who 3, 4 years later that you really get to see who they are, and you got to look at Sam Darnold. I think he was in arguably the worst situation possible that he could have been in. Now he has a top five, top three running back, and then he has two nice weapons with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. Now he's getting a real shot to where you can see if this guy is legit. And I would be like, it wouldn't surprise me if Carolina took a quarterback at the eighth pick. But why I would say they shouldn't is because Sam Darnold had he's never had somebody believe in him. And now with Carolina trading for him, that shows that they believe in him. But if you go out there and you get, say, Justin Fields at the eighth pick, you're basically saying to him, we expect you to fail, so we're getting a backup plan in case you do fail. That just wouldn't be smart in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the Panthers go in two directions or three. It depends on how the draft goes. If Kyle Pitts falls there, you draft Kyle Pitts, no
You
doubt.
draft him, yeah.
But at the eighth pick, I think there are two realistic options, and they're going to be ahead of the curve in terms of drafting these players. Rashawn Slater and Patrick Surtain the second. The Cowboys are hoping Surtain falls to 10. And I think Surtain's floor is 9 with Denver. So I think that the Panthers could, better their secondary because right now they have Dante Jackson. They drafted Troy Pride Jr. last year and they signed AJ Boye. Maybe they can get another corner or they go offensive line and try to, make it better because right now they still have Taylor Martin on the right side at tackle, Matt Paradis, and now you can get a left tackle for your future in Rashawn Slater. So I think they go in those type of directions.
Yeah, those are very. That's a that would be the ideal situation for them is to go Penny Sewell at 8. There's a very good chance that he falls. But switching, let's talk about more of Trey Lance. And I know we said Trey Lance is a very raw prospect, and I think he's arguably the rawest one out of the top 5 guys that everybody's naming. Give me your view on how he's been being judged, like all the question marks that he has been put around him. How do you see that?
I'm actually surprised that there are so much hype around Trey Lance. This is one of the guys that has really shocked me because it's not that I don't see it. It's that it's I don't see it enough. Like I don't think it's to the point where he should be in the mix for the third overall pick or even top 10. I think the media has blown this up way out of proportion and I wouldn't be surprised if he slips to the second round. Like because I think he's that raw. When you look at the team he played for, North Dakota State, they ran the ball so much. I mean, North Dakota State, they're better in the FCS than Alabama is in the college football and Division One football. They have won 8 national championships in the last 10 years. Trey Lance wasn't asked to throw the ball much. He threw the ball like in more than half of his games, he threw the ball 23 times or less. And he only threw the ball like 30 times 2 times, against Central Arkansas, and that was one of his worst games. And I
Mhm.
forgot the other one, but even in his playoff run, because I primarily watched those games, there were about 3 games in the playoffs where he threw 15 times or less. And yes, he ran a lot, but it's not like I want to know how you are as a thrower in college. Like Lamar Jackson in college, at least, he was running like 20 times a game, 20 attempts, but he was passing like 30 times a game, maybe sometimes 40. Like he was throwing the ball all over the field. Trey Lance, the team he was on was stacked. He didn't have to do much. You picture Jimmy Garoppolo in the 49ers offense and Ryan Tannehill in the Tennessee Titans offense. That was Trey Lance's role in North Dakota State. He was a game manager type of quarterback. So that's why I'm not high on him. They ran the ball 300, they had 300 rushing yards per game, North Dakota State. Like,
Mhm.
that's crazy to me. So because of that, I'm not really high on Trey Lance. Obviously, the physical traits are there. He's 6'4", 225, but the hype he's been getting is really crazy to me. I don't see it at all. I saw this Colin Coward a graphic of like percentage of the percentages of like that these quarterbacks have to pan out.
Hmm.
Lawrence is like a 90%. Lance is second, like 70%.
Yeah, he's very high on him.
Zach Wilson is last at like 10%. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Colin Coward is also the guy who said Sam Darnold was generational. Josh
Hmm.
Rosen was this. Baker was bad. Joe Burrow was overhyped. Tua was special. And now he's backed up on Tua. I don't take those sports shows seriously, but those are the guys that create the narratives for why Trey Lance is getting as hyped as he is. And I just don't see it at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't say that I've fell for him, and I think my reasoning for why I can see Trey Lance at the 3 isn't really based off of how raw he is or anything like that. But I mean, one stat that blows my mind is the fact that in 16 games, a quarterback who has the most passing yards obviously is Mahomes. Mahomes throws the ball crazy amount, but then the guy who's in second is Nick Mullins, which is amazing to me that Kyle Shanahan can literally take a backup quarterback and raise him to his ceiling. And I think with Trey Lance, and then they've already told Jimmy Garoppolo that he's the quarterback he's starting next year, and I do believe that that's not a smokescreen and that he will be the quarterback week 1. But the reason I say they should go Trey Lance is because my pro comp, in my opinion, to him is sort of his ceiling to me could be Josh Allen. If he was able to come out and throw the ball how I believe he can with his type of arm, I think he can get to Josh Allen. But my main reasoning why I say that, the 49ers should take him is, one, he can learn from a quarterback who's been to a Super Bowl. That in itself is very important. Jimmy Garoppolo knows what it takes. He knows what he has to do to get there. Although I can, like you said, Jimmy Garoppolo is a game manager. But besides sitting a year, I also think Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel play a huge part in it. And, with their off, even Raheem Mostert, they all three of them play a huge role in it. I think they're like one of the most creative offenses right behind the Chiefs and the Ravens, because both of those, Deebo Samuel is like a wide receiver, running back type of guy. Brandon Ayuk is more of a wide receiver, but he can take the behind the line runs and take those and those wide receiver screens. And I think you implement those with Raheem Mostert, and then with Trey Lance's legs, he can be at his ceiling very soon, being under Shanahan, Garoppolo, and having those weapons around him.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if you're sitting a quarterback for a year, I think Trey Lance gives you more upside than Justin Fields. And I think Trey Lance is a better thrower of the football, and he's more consistent with his mechanics than Justin Fields. With that being said, obviously Kyle Shanahan could do wonders with quarterbacks, but I just don't know. I'm just not very sold on Trey Lance.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I see it, and obviously the most crazy stat about Trey Lance is that he threw 28 touchdowns and had 0 interceptions, right? But watching the games, there were a
Yeah,
lot of
that's that.
interceptions that should have been dropped. There were a lot of interceptions that should have been some pick sixes. It just worries me that he started 16 games, and obviously Mac Jones only started about like 17 around there. But Lance attempted 228 passes around there. Mac Jones is like 378. And on top of that, when you talk about Alabama's competition versus North Dakota State's competition, best team North Dakota State played was James Madison. Like James Madison, who are
Yeah, that's not scary.
you're not playing great competition. At least Mac Jones was carving defenses up, but they had NFL talent on that defense. Obviously, he had NFL talent too, but he's playing against NFL talent as well. Trey Lance is not. So, I'm not high on Trey Lance, but obviously I could see him becoming a great quarterback if he's under the right system with the right coach and has the right development. At the end of the day, the draft is all about where these guys go, especially at the quarterback position.
Facts.
So
Yeah.
if they have the best situation, they probably have the best case scenario for succeeding.
Yeah, like you said. I mean, yeah, personally, if I was Shanahan or their GM, I actually would go, I would go Mac Jones in all seriousness, because you got to look at it like this. Shanahan's only had like 1 or 2 winning seasons with San Francisco because, his first season, I think Garoppolo got hurt. That was a down year. And then this season, this was a down year. But let's just listen. OSU has 4 top 100 defensive players on that defense. The defensive tackle, Tommy Togoai, I don't know how to pronounce his name. They have a linebacker, Baron Browning, and linebacker Pete Warner. Oh, I said four, I meant three. And then they've got a guy, Justin Hillard, I think his name is, who's like on the edge of top 100. So those are four guys who will be drafted for sure. And then you've got Sean Wade. And you look at the game that he had against him on the biggest days, the biggest game any college player could ever play in their entire life. He had 464 yards on an 80% completion rating with 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. Like that's what you want a guy to do against NFL talent. Like this guy's going against as much NFL talent as you could ask him to, and he carved it up to the point where he was taken out with a lot of time left in the fourth quarter. Like this guy, I don't think Shanahan wants to go through another losing season and to bank on Jimmy Garoppolo staying healthy because frankly he just won't. He'll end up getting hurt sometime soon, and the backup quarterback, one of these rookies, will have to come in. And I think if you want a guy to take that drop off from Jimmy Garoppolo to over like staying here, you will want Mac Jones because Mac Jones could take it from here to up here. And I think Trey Lance, although I think he's very skillful, if he had to come in year one, he would potentially bring it from here to here.
Exactly. And Mac Jones, obviously the knock on him is that he has great talent, but he didn't have bad games. Like I think his worst game to me was against Ole Miss. You keep waiting on Mac Jones to show you that he's just this pedestrian quarterback, and he keeps having elite after elite after elite performances. He finished with the highest completion percentage in college football history. I'm pretty sure the highest passer rating. I'm not too sure about that. But when Tua did it, we praised him even though he doesn't have the height or the arm that Mac Jones has. When Dwayne Haskins did it at Ohio State and most of his yards came from yards after catch, we praised him. The Giants would be silly to not pick him at 6. And Haskins ran like a 5-second 40 time. But that
Yeah.
didn't matter. That you still got to take him at 6 because he's the most talented quarterback. But Mac Jones runs a 4.79, has one of the best seasons in college football history for a quarterback, and he's not even a first round talent.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. This might sound crazy to say, but I think in any other year that Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence aren't the top guys, and
Okay.
there's a quarterback needy team at 1, Mac Jones could be the number 1 overall pick.
Very easily.
Like he's like guys
Very.
like him have been the number 1 overall pick before, and I think after his season, he definitely deserves more recognition and way less hate. There are
Yeah.
people hating on him on Twitter for his workouts and how he squats. Like, there's nothing that Mac Jones does that he won't get hate for at this point.
You cannot succeed with the media. It's just like whatever you do. Like I've seen some people laugh at the way like people work out. Like you look at the Dak Prescott. I know you've seen the meme where he's going like this and doing his workout. Like people will find any little thing they can to just pick you apart. And I think like Mac Jones to me, he's the type of guy who can like ignore that completely and just dial in on his game. And he's shown time and time again that football is very serious to him and that he will sit there and dial in and just completely dismantle your defense. Now, we've discussed all these quarterbacks. I want to know what are some ways that when you watch a guy like Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, that you decide, okay, is he a good quarterback? Is he not? What is his flaws? What is his pros? Like, how do you scout a quarterback?
So for me, I don't pretend to be anything I'm not. I know that I'm not a Chris Sims or a QB
Mm-hmm.
school or these guys when it comes to analyzing the quarterback position because I never played it. Nor do I know all the schemes that some of these teams are running and can't dissect the game from that aspect. I just see what is there. So if I think this guy's making consistently great throws, I see how he maneuvers a pocket. I see how he moves safeties and linebackers with his eyes. I see where he goes with the football. You know, the guy who does that the best and obviously makes the least amount of mistakes, that's the guy that I have ranked higher. So that's how I go about my stuff. I know some concepts, but obviously when you're watching games, you don't know what that team is running exactly. Defenses, it's easier to see what coverage they're in, but on offense, it's harder to tell, what type of plays these guys are running. So because of that, I just go off who I think looks the best and who I think made the least amount of mistakes. So when I scout these guys, I have a notebook and every single play, every single throw, I write down everything, whether it's a missed throw, made throw, whatever, I write down everything that happens. And at the end of doing one player, I give my grade for them at the end. Their scouting report, what I think they're good and what I think they're bad at, and I just go from there.
Yeah, man, that's a very great way to look at it. And obviously, we all have dreams and things like that. Personally, I want to be. I don't want to be no scout. I want to be a journalist and things like that. But when I'm looking at a quarterback such as Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, those type of guys, I look at a few things such as arm talent, footwork, their ability to read the field. Like if they see whether the check down's open or if something's open downfield. I love when quarterbacks pre-throw something when they throw the ball and it's not even open and they throw them open. I'm very big on that. Their throwing style and just their physicals. Like, I mean, and physicals and like when I say that, that comes last under all of them because like you've got guys like Kyler Murray who are the smaller guys. Like Zach Wilson's like 6'2", but he's a slimmer guy. But that matters to an extent. Like these guys can still play football at an extremely high level. That really, that's just how I look at these guys. I mean, like you said, I sit down, I watch most of their snaps from. And what I like to do is I like to watch their worst games, like where they play the worst at, because I like to see, okay, when people see on the stat sheet, and stats are very misleading. 99% of the time, stats are very misleading. I like to sit down and watch, okay, what did you do right in this game? What did you do wrong? Why is this what the stat sheet says? And a lot of the times you see that some things happen are misfortunate. Like you see a lot of batted balls get intercepted. You see the O-line not blocking. A lot of things that they cannot control, and sometimes it is their fault. But a lot of times I feel like people go off of, okay, this is what this stat says, and this stat says this, and they're like, okay, this is why he's a good quarterback, and then they really don't look into it too heavily. And in my opinion, you've got to do the in-depth research on like in the worst games where they didn't look too bright. Like you could look at the $500, I mean, not $500. 500 passing yard games that they have and be like, okay, yeah, he did this. Like if you look at Mac Jones's OSU game, you can make a case for him to be the first pick, obviously, because 400 plus yards is outstanding. But nonetheless, I think you gotta look at the worst games from these quarterbacks and just dial in on what they do right, what they do wrong. And at the end of the day, none of us get paid for this, except for like those real analysts. So none of us fans get paid for this. So we're all doing it just for fun. So that's why it really is fun to me. So,
The thing about it is that perfect statement that you just made, and I'll give a perfect example. Zach Wilson versus Coastal Carolina.
oh my, perfect.
It's labeled as his worst game, and
Yes,
for me, I thought he played great. Like I thought he played great. I
exactly.
didn't think it was a bad game. There were a lot of things that went wrong. Especially that one interception that people love to hold him accountable for. I mean, it was a Hail Mary to the end
Yeah,
zone, at the end of the first half. What is he supposed to do? He's just trying to make a play. So that was one example right there. So yeah, I totally agree. And I just want to say this too is that, even though I talk about these quarterbacks and I rank them, it's not me kind of giving a stamp on their career. Because I
yeah,
know a
for
lot of
sure.
people like to make videos about how guys are going to be busts. I mean, last year we saw that a bunch with Justin Herbert. Me personally, I'm 21 years old. So I'm not going to judge another 20-year-old that's trying to chase their dream. Obviously all these guys hope that they have a great football career. So for me, I list out the pros and cons, but I don't try to label them or try to say they're going to be this or that or try to bash them in any way. Because at the end of the day, they're young dudes, they're younger brothers, men. So for me to be the same age and try to knock this guy, I think it's pretty cold in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could never really predict it. Like nobody really wanted to predict that Justin Herbert was going to be the best quarterback or he was going to have the best season out of all the quarterbacks. Nobody wanted to predict that. Like you can never really predict how a guy's going to go out unless like he's in the perfect situation with the perfect head coach. And still, you couldn't predict the guy if he's going to be perfect or not. At the end of the day, it's a coin toss on. Are you going to be good? Are you not? At the end of the day, like you said, these guys are similar to our age, are close to our age, and they're chasing their dreams. So you can't really bash these guys and be like, no, you're going to suck. You're going to suck. You're going to be great. Like you just can't do that. You just got to – I wish the best for every single one of these quarterbacks. And I know I say, here's where Justin Fields plays bad. Here's where Justin Fields doesn't succeed. But I really hope Justin Fields lands at a team that he can have a Hall of Fame career and win multiple Super Bowls. Because at the end of the day, these guys are trying to play the game that they love.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree with that.
So let's talk about the big controversy, and we talked about Joe Burrow and obviously the injury that he had. Let's talk about the big conversation of would it be dumb if they took Jamar Chase or should they play it safe and take Sewell or Slater?
I don't think it would be dumb if they take Jamar Chase. If it were me, I would take Jamar Chase because I think he fits that offense. I think you get Jamar Chase with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. That's a top five receiving core in the league. And I listened to a Carson Palmer interview yesterday about how he said he hopes they take Panay Sewell or a tackle for that fact. He hopes that they do because they need to protect Joe Burrow. And while Carson Palmer is absolutely right, he has a case, to be right, 100% correct. He also had Chad Johnson, Chad Ochocinco. He also had TJ Hushmanzada. He also had Chris Henry. I mean, this guy, he had a lot of help on the outside. So, Carson, you could have had a great offensive line, but what if you didn't have Ocho Cinco? You wouldn't have been as good. So, and I don't think anybody on the Bengals right now is Ocho Cinco. I don't think T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd are alpha number one receivers, bona fide. They can be a top five receiver in the league. I think Jamar Chase has the potential to be that. So because of that, I'd go him in. This is a stacked draft class for tackles.
Exactly.
With their day two pick, they can maybe get a tackle and get a guy like Alex Leatherwood or maybe a Sam Cosmi or Tevin Jenkins falls there, maybe a Dylan Radins. But they signed Riley Reef in free agency, who's a pretty good right tackle. You got Jonah Williams and Riley Reef, who are both good tackles. Quinn Spain last year when he joined the Bengals around midseason, he solidified that guard spot. So even day two, you go Landon Dickerson or a Creed Humphrey or Wyatt Davis. I mean, there are ways to improve that offensive line without spending a first round pick on the offensive line. So because of that, I would go Jamar Chase. But the best thing about the Bengals is that no matter who they pick, between Chase or Pitts or Sewell or Rashawn Slater, all of them would be great picks, and you can justify all of those picks.
For sure, for sure. And I think when people, like one thing that I feel like I'm really unique on is that, like you said, you add Jamar Chase to that. That's a top five receiving core, and I think not only do they have three receivers, but they have Auden Tate as that fourth receiver, who is a very good go up and get it type of receiver. Now he's not the speed guy, like he's not a John Ross that they previously had, but he's a guy who, if you throw it up to him, he can win those 50-50 balls from time and time again. And personally, if I was the Bengals GM, which I would never be, I would have Chase and then Slater and then Sewell. Because like you said, they have a tackle and then they just pick one up at free agency. So you have your tackles. Go out and get Rashawn. If you wanted to get O-line, you get Slater. Slater can play that guard spot and he can play it at a very high level. And I think he is, if he transitioned to guard, can be a all pro potential type of guard at that position. Now, nonetheless, you add Jamar Chase, not only do you get a guy who is previously played with Joe Burrow and played at a very high level. So you're getting that chemistry. And like you said, there's always day two guys. Like you've got Brady Christian, Dylan Radons out of North Dakota State with Trey Lance. Like there's guys day two who can still produce well. Like who's to say these day two guys who are projected day two guys won't outperform these day one guys? You never know. But you know what you're getting in Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Damn, they played together, so you can go watch the tape. Like Joe Burrow would have the supporting cast and Joe Mixon. I feel like they should draft a tight end in later rounds because CJ Uzama isn't the guy who is really going to be that much of a weapon for Burrow. But then you have Jamar Chase, Auden Tate, T. Higgins. Like you have these guys who can help Burrow succeed. And like you said, Carson Palmer without Ocho Cinco, arguably one of the best route runners to ever play the game, his job would have been a lot harder if he didn't have him.
Yeah, and the thing about it, while you were talking, I thought about this scenario. Maybe to tease Bengals fans a little bit, because even if they don't draft Jamar Chase, let's say they go Panay Sewell. I think Panay Sewell, if he moves to guard, he can be an all pro guard, like you mentioned, no doubt
For
about it.
sure.
You draft Panay Sewell with the fifth pick. Then with your second round pick, you draft Creed Humphrey. Now your offensive line is Riley Reeve, Jonah Williams, Panay Sewell, Creed Humphrey, and Quentin Spain. I mean, you have your offensive line in the future, and then you can draft a wide receiver like a Diami Brown in the third round or something like that, and they'll be fine. So there are so many ways to fix this Bengals team. I'm really fascinated to see what they do because I think they have the most interesting pick within the top 10 picks in the entire draft because we're kind of going to see what direction they're going to go in based on that pick.
For sure, man. Like you look at Atlanta, they could either go defense, quarterback. The first three you most likely can predict. Then you've got Dallas, you've got Denver, Detroit, and Denver. Like I might have said Denver twice, but those guys you can almost predict what they're going to do, and obviously you can predict the Bengals pick and whether it to be one of these four guys and Kyle Pitts included in that. But one of those four guys will show this is where the Bengals are going to go for their future, and this is how much they let alone trust their offensive line now, but how much they trust Joe Burrow to stay healthy in the future. Now, we're coming to an end, so let's talk about one or two draft hot takes that you have that when you've talked to people, they're not that high on, or they give you backlash for it. Talking like, what's your hot take?
If Mac Jones isn't the third pick, then I could very well see the Giants picking him at 11. Also, I think I have two more hot takes. I think Caleb Farley's going to slip. I think that's obvious.
Oh, yeah, for
But
sure.
I think whoever gets him is going to have a steal in the draft. I think Trey Lance, don't sleep on him not going in the first round because I know he's a mock to go to the Patriots, but Bill Belichick doesn't have that patience. There are so many guys you can plug and play right now with that first round pick that I don't think he'd take Trey Lance at 15. Also, Kellen Mond, don't sleep on him going in the first round.
Yeah, I've seen him put in there a few times. I know Chris Sims is very high. Like he's higher on him than Justin Fields, and I think Trey Lance. So I think I haven't watched him yet, but I've heard he's a very intriguing prospect.
Yeah, I mean Kellen Mond for me, Chicago would be the place. I was picking.
Yeah, I definitely could see them if they don't get him at the 20th. They have the 52nd pick, and I definitely could see them trading back up to get him if he decides to fall. My two hot takes for this draft, they were a bit more. My first one was that Zach Wilson will have the best rookie year and or career out of all of these guys. I think he just has it all. I know the Jets don't have that surefire wide receiver one, and I know they hope Corey Davis will become that guy. And then you got Jameson Crowder and what's the other guy name? Denzel Mims. You've got those guys. I do believe that they can be a good supporting cast for him, and they also have the 23rd pick if they wanted to get. They wouldn't go receiver, but you go running back or defense. So one of those two. And my other one was that Jamin Davis sneaks into the first round. I see him in like the 20 to 32. Like if you haven't seen this guy is electric. My pro comp for him is a little lower than Devin White, but he can get to that Devin White type level. Like this guy flies all over the field. I think he ran like a 4.3 something at his pro day. Like the guy's electric at the linebacker position. He flies all around, and I think teams will start to notice that this guy is a intriguing linebacker who can play at a very high level.
Yeah, I like Jamin Davis a lot.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming on, man. This has been a great talk. I learned a lot from how you do things and things like that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was a pleasure.
Peace out.